What's up? Welcome in. It is that time of the week. The Sooners on SI podcast. This might be the only time I know it. This is episode 301. Hope you guys enjoyed our extra special episode 300. Last week, they got derailed a little bit by John Mateer and Dr. Shin, but we are back. OU, Kent State, breaking it all down. We've got our man, the myth, our leader, the legend, fresh up a in and out road trip to SoFi to watch a fantastic football game. John Hoover, how are the Rams? How are they treating you? How is SoFi?
SoFi's amazing. I stopped over in Vegas for a quick tour of the Sphere. A little lady by the name of Dorothy Gale took me around the rainbow, I guess. That was awesome. I got to see. If you've not seen the Sphere or don't know anything about it, look it up. It is unbelievable. It's like aliens dropped down and left us a gift and then took off. But yeah, the highlight of the weekend was the game. Rams took down the Colts. And yes, I did come back with some new gear. I only buy my official team gear at the stadium. So all my Yankees gear that I've got, I got it at one of the two Yankee stadiums, so on and so forth. And my man, A.D. Mitchell, if the Colts cut you, just know you can sleep on my couch anytime. I got space for you in my house and my heart.
Fair enough. I would save myself a lot of money, or maybe not if I had to go to London every time I wanted to buy something. Because here's the thing, I wouldn't stop buying it. I would just go to London a lot more. We also got our man Carson Field. Carson, how did the off week treat you, my friend?
It was good. Like we talked about last week, a little busier than expected. That will happen when your quarterback's injured. But this kind of feels like a bye week too. No disrespect to our friends in Kent, Ohio. But excited to be back out there, if nothing else. Shouldn't be much of a game. Looking forward to it, though.
Yeah, Kent State got a brief mention by Brent Venables and 0 questions, which good job, everybody, for not asking a Kent State question. That might be the only time we mention Kent State today on this podcast. All right, we're recording at 11:50 in the morning on Wednesday, technically morning, which means that Ryan Aber, by the time you're listening to this, could be over the moon as the Cubs are staring down a big-time matchup with the Milwaukee Brewers, or he'll be mad at me for even bringing up baseball. Either way, Aber, good morning, good afternoon, good night. How are you?
I'm doing good. As long as we can get this thing wrapped up in 2 hours and 10 minutes, we'll be good.
Dear God, it'll be better.
Yeah, I think we'll be okay, but
we
should be a good day for baseball for sure.
Yeah, day one of the playoffs was excellent. It's October 1st. We're October in baseball land. And the countdown to OU Texas is on. No, it's not on. No matter how many people got asked about it on Monday night, Oklahoma does have another game before then. It's against the Kent State Golden Flashes. We're going to do this at the top. They're really bad. They might be the worst team in the FBS. That is the extent of our Kent State talk. All right, it's really Michael Hawkins week because of Kent State. Oklahoma, last year they had the bye going into Texas. This year, not quite, but basically it's kind of like a double bye. A lot of working on themselves, a lot of, they're not going to say this, they're going to do a one-day walkthrough on Kent State. Everything else is either going to be focused on Oklahoma or Texas this week. And it's a good week to have that happen, as we mentioned last week, all the material news, all that stuff. You know it is Michael Hawkins week. And just a funny quirk of the year, didn't really ask about Michael Hawkins during the spring to Ben Arbuckle because we only talked to him after the Crimson Combine. Haven't really had a reason to ask Ben Arbuckle about Michael Hawkins Jr. To this point throughout fall camp in the first few weeks because it's all been Mateer focused, all that stuff. So, Hoove, this is the first weekend that we really get to see Michael Hawkins run the offense. He came into that Temple game that Carson and I were there for. Basically, I feel kind of bad for him. It was run, and throw on 3rd and long, which is a condensed playbook because you're just trying to run the clock, all that stuff. I do not hold that game for or against Michael Hawkins Jr. What have you heard this week, Hoove, that stuck out to you from Brent Venables, the players on Monday night, Ben Arbuckle on Tuesday? It's our first chance to really dive into a lot of Michael Hawkins Jr. development kind of conversation here this season.
Yeah, I don't want to be a doomsayer, but you guys remember who asked the first question at Media Day of Ben Arbuckle and what that question was, right? Tell us what your backup plan is for your backup plan. Tell us about how you're evaluating your QB3s between Jet New and Whit Neubauer. Guys, we're one play away from finding out the answer to that question. No, I said that's just a joke. You mentioned the questions to him, so we will move on with Michael Hawkins. Can't wait to see him perform as the starter again. You know, it's been since the bowl game, and you remember who the quarterback's coach was for the bowl game, Ben Arbuckle. He's got a little bit of a background to know what Michael Hawkins is capable of in an actual football game. So he could, plus he's got the film from when he was the starter and when he got all the backup snaps and all that stuff. I look for a big day on a conservative sense from Michael Hawkins. A lot of handoffs, a lot of short throws. They're not going to reveal anything. They're back in that preseason non-conference mode where the next game is Texas and you can't be putting anything important on film. But the fact of the matter is you've got to get Michael Hawkins some meaningful and important snaps. You've got to get him developed quickly for the role that he's in right now. And with John Mateer walking around with a Band-Aid on his thumb, a Band-Aid, Dr. Shin, are you kidding me? Come on now. 40 years I've been dealing with this thing. I still can't get doctors to figure it out. My thumb is jacked up. Anyway, it's a big, like you said, a big week for Michael Hawkins. And if he is able to get out of this week healthy, I think you're going to see a completely different Michael Hawkins than what you saw last year. Why? Because he's got a quarterback's coach. He's got two actually. Last year, how many did he have? 0 until, toward the end. He's got an offensive coordinator, right? Who knows what he's doing. Didn't have that throughout most of last year. He's got healthy wide receivers, including one that he's getting back from the IR this week, Giovanni Gibson. He's got a stable of running backs. Offensive line is playing better than it certainly was last year. I'd look for big things this week from Michael Hawkins. And then we transition into next week and we see just how good Texas defense is. We all think it's fantastic. They put a lot of stuff on film that shows they're really good, Texas. But against a healthy Oklahoma offense, even if it's Michael Hawkins, I don't think next week's going to be 34-3.
Yeah, the offensive line too, something Britt Bibbles touched on, that they're getting healthier. We talked to Fechi Weewoo on Monday night. He said this bye week was huge for that. Carson, it's a Kent State defense that gave up almost 400 yards of rushing to Florida State. And so I think that it becomes a pretty interesting, how do you approach Saturday type situation. On one hand, if it is Michael Hawkins Jr. against Texas, and we'll talk about some of the material stuff in a bit, this is your one shot to get him as fully confident running everything on a Saturday, all that stuff. We saw in week 1 that Ben Arbuckle liked having John Mateer run all those reps with the ones at receiver to get those guys ready for Michigan. The flip side, the other thing Oklahoma's offense needs to accomplish is get any running back, whoever wants to step up and run the football into rhythm. How would you balance the running game, Michael Hawkins Jr., and everything that I think Oklahoma wants to check off before getting everybody out of there to keep everyone healthy for Texas?
Yeah, that's the most important thing, I think, finding that balance, flashing that ability of Hawkins to throw downfield, because we really, as you mentioned in the intro, haven't seen that. I mean, he came in Temple, he threw 3 passes. They obviously weren't really running the offense at that point. Hawkins admittedly did not look great in his short time in Temple, but a lot of that can be attributed to the starters were out of the game. This was a game OU was leading by 39 points. But early in this game, I do want to see some downfield shots to guys like Deion Burks, guys like Keontez Lewis, finding Jaron Kanik down the field. I want to see that. I want to see that he really can lead this offense, albeit against a really not great defense. But further down the line, running game wise, if we don't see production out of Jaden Ott this game, I'm not sure we'll see production out of Jaden Ott the rest of the year. This is kind of his time to shine. See, hey, are you actually going to contribute to this team? Or were you just an NIL get, kind of just taking advantage of the money you got? Want to see that. Torrey Blaylock obviously didn't have a great game against Auburn, but he's really shown flashes in previous games. I thought against Temple, he was excellent. Even against Michigan, he showed that he could be a really good running back. And I still think he will be for years to come for this OU team. So I want to see just a variety of guys. X Robinson, we saw him late against Temple. He looked good. Barnes has gotten better since a really slow week 1. But at the end of the day, it is Kent State. I love the media training that OU's players have absolutely received, saying yeah, this is the focus. They're a good team. No, this is not a good team. This isn't even Temple or Illinois State. This is a really bad team that the spread is 40, I think 46.5 last I looked, for a reason. There is very little of, yeah, we need to beat Kent State. It is more, keeping your guys healthy, seeing what works for Hawkins, seeing what the running game can do before playing a defense that is widely considered top 5, top 10 in the nation.
We saw Ben Arbuckle talk a little bit, Aber, about like what's that process when you're tweaking an offense slightly for Mateer, slightly for Hawkins, because you're going to run the same system, but each of those guys have their same strengths. Feels like this will be another moment. I hesitate to say like test for Ben Arbuckle because it's Kent State. They should go out there and put a bunch of points on the board, but just another moment where we get to see his coaching chops kind of shine through, and this is the fruits of Ben Arbuckle and John Kuceyeski, the offensive analyst who has come in, who's basically the QB's coach, as far as this was a big 10-month development project for those two guys. They had worked with Mateer previously. I'm excited to see, can we see a leap forward from Michael Hawkins' game? Is he anticipating throws over the middle of the field, something that Arnold and Hawkins were both like scared to do at any point last year for a lot of different factors? You're muted, Aber.
Yeah, I think that's going to be fascinating to watch. And I think it was interesting to hear Ben Arbuckle talk about how that process is sort of going to bleed into the game, and that it's not just something you can be set on going into the game and set on in practice. You've got to sort of get a feel for how he's going to perform in the game and what works, what doesn't, things like that. So that's going to be really interesting. You know, Michael Hawkins and John Mateer aren't the exact same type of quarterback in a lot of ways. You know, strengths and weaknesses on both sides. Ben Arbuckle talked about sort of that process of feeling it out in practice and leaning into strengths with each of those quarterbacks, but then having to sort of be flexible a little bit in games, and that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But I think the biggest thing for Michael Hawkins is just to get comfortable, get into a rhythm. We've talked about how bad Kent State is. They're every bit as bad as advertised. Haven't won an FBS game since 22. The season when Oklahoma and Kent State last played. I believe they won their last game that season against Buffalo. But this is not a team that's going to really press them. But it's also, I don't think you can hold back too much for Texas, although there will be some of that. Obviously, the hope for them is that they'll get John Mateer back. But you've got to get Michael Hawkins in case you need him against Texas, in case you need him late in the season, feeling comfortable in this offense, getting into a rhythm and developing an in-game rapport with these receivers who are just so much different from what he had a year ago. You can point out things about Michael Hawkins' game that, you know, was a problem last year, the turnovers, things like that, but he didn't have any weapons around him, especially in the passing game. He's got that this time, and that's why I think it'll be better, if nothing else. But I do think we'll see improvement for Michael Hawkins Jr.
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. And Ryan Chapman, the thing that stands out to me about John Kuceyeski is the relationship that he's got kind of inextricable right now with Ben Arbuckle. And Ben Arbuckle yesterday mentioned that in his press conference that he says, you know, I can turn the quarterbacks over to him. I can go over. I don't have to spend all my time with the quarterbacks. I can go over with the tight ends or the wide receivers or the running backs or the O-line or whatever and interact with their coaches and the players over there. I don't have to be focused constantly on the quarterback. So what that tells you is that Coach Kuz may be one of those guys that's a little bit of a behind the scenes, not to bring back the Wizard of Oz, but he's kind of the one pulling the levers back there behind the curtain, you know. Not entirely, not all on him, but I'm just saying he's maybe an unsung MVP of the coaching staff, a guy who gets back there and works with the you know, technique on the quarterbacks. We saw him in spring practice and some of the drills they were doing where they had the bags and they're doing all kinds of, you know, dipping in and out of the bags and hitting them with those cushiony footballs, you know, and they're smacking them, and quarterbacks got to keep their eyes downfield and there's the timing out their throw. Kuceyeski was the guy that was right there in the middle of all that stuff, running the drills. So he's one of those guys. Maybe he's like a quarterback savant in terms of teaching. We don't know. And you know, frankly, if he's that responsible for, you know, Cam Ward's development and John Mateer's development, and if we see something special out of Michael Hawkins, who knows how long he's going to be here? Somebody's going to come along and try to hire him away really quick.
Yeah, it's something I'd ask because we hadn't really We had talked to Brent Venables about Arbuckle and Kuz, and he always kind of like groups them together as
Yep.
he gave them the frickin' frack
Yep.
relationship that Danny Stutzman and Jaron Kanek had. But it was one of those things that, yeah, Arbuckle basically said, director of player ops, player personnel at Western Kentucky, quickly figured out not only is he someone who actually knows what he's talking about, but he's a good teacher very quickly. And it just kind of stands out because we all remember, at least Hoover and Aber, who were there for the Luttrell era, as little as it was. Seth Luttrell, he'd be over there by the quarterbacks and all that stuff, but he's a guy that, while a head coach at North Texas that had a Graham Harrell and a Mason Fine was able to bring guys along, Seth himself had not ever been a dedicated quarterback coach. Ben Arbuckle has been that, and I thought it just stood out during fast forward to like fall camp. There'd be moments where I'd be down trying to get pictures of the offensive line on one field. They would blow the whistle. Hey, we're going to a special teams period on the other far practice field. And sometimes I'm like, hey, I'm not really going to get all the way over there. Carson's over there. I'm just going to come hang out by the quarterbacks and just watch these guys throw for a little bit. And whether Arbuckle, it was funny. That was when they were being like really, really slow with Deion Burks early in fall camp, and they would have Deion Burks stand in the back of the end zone, and then Ben Arbuckle would stand like in the corner of the end zone, and they would have the quarterbacks throw to them, and Arbuckle would have overarching like, "Hey, we need this or we need that," but it was Coach Kuceyeski that was always right behind Mateer or right behind Michael Hawkins Jr. being like, "That was a good rep," or "That was a good rep, but let's do this," or "Hey, we need to watch our footwork here." It just kind of takes me back. Aber, you probably remember this is immediately after the quarterback change or the coordinator change last year, excuse me, just talking to, I believe at the time it was Jackson Arnold, and when Kevin Johns was elevated, him immediately just saying like, "Hey, my footwork immediately improved," because it was something that Kevin Johns just wanted to come in and control what you can control. You've had that now from two guys that have built an offense and in a system and have worked together and all that stuff. I feel like that can only be a help for obviously John Mateer, but Michael Hawkins based off the kind of coaching, the system of coaching he had last year.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the Arbuckle Kuceyeski relationship has clearly paid dividends with virtually every quarterback that they've had. You think about the success and the elevation that we saw in Cam Ward, obviously John Mateer, and I'm not saying that Michael Hawkins is going to be either of those guys, and certainly won't be Saturday. But I think the a fact that he's had this level of coaching for an extended period. And we saw what that level of coaching could do last year, even in a short period, with some of those things that you mentioned with Jackson Arnold. And I think no doubt he was a better quarterback when he was working closer with Kevin Johns than he was before that. And you make me feel old a little bit when you say the Seth Luttrell era, because me and Hoove, I won't speak for Hoove, but for me, when you say that, I'm thinking back to 99 and 2000
Yeah.
covering this team with Seth Luttrell as the fullback. But it can definitely help a guy to have a quarterbacks coach who knows, not that Seth Luttrell didn't know what he was talking about, but when you know that a guy has a track record of developing quarterbacks and has been in it for as long as those two have been, and the way that they're able to work together, I think it's going to pay tremendous dividends. You talk about that Temple game. I don't think you can take a lot out of that at all from what we saw about Michael Hawkins, because he's not running the offense. Not that I anticipate him getting much of a pushback from Kent State's defense this week, but I think you're going to see a quarterback who is much better prepared to contribute to this team in SEC play now versus what we saw last year when he flashed moments, but on balance struggled.
And Carson too, he's got Michael Hawkins has got Arbuckle in his corner, he's got Kuz in his corner, he's also got John Mateer, who I thought some of the interesting stuff yesterday too was something I had never really just processed and thought about. But in this situation, Mateer learned behind Cam Ward, so he knows what it's like to be in Michael Hawkins' shoes. And it's also not one of those situations, Carson, where this isn't like last year where one guy replaced another and they're directly competing. Like when Mateer's healthy, it's going to be Mateer back in. Everyone knows that. I think that smooths over every backup quarterback dynamic to help that process along of having a guy there to be like, hey, look out for this, look out for that. I'm seeing this, and just one more guy to be there to support Michael Hawkins.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, even if Michael Hawkins goes out there against Kent State and breaks the FBS single game passing record, he's not taking John Mateer's job. And I think that maybe makes the relationship a little bit healthier, just because he knows he's not competing for Mateer's job. Mateer knows that Hawkins isn't going to steal his job. But it also says a lot about the leadership of both of those players. Mateer, everything we've heard, everything we've seen is that he is a vocal guy. And it seems like he's continued that despite having surgery, now being back with the program. That's huge. And credit to Hawkins, too. I mean, covering some of those Brent Venables camps in the summer, seeing when Baker Mayfield was in town. Michael Hawkins knew he was not going to be the starting quarterback game one. He never disassociated. He was a big part of just being a leader in this program, being someone that even if he's the number 2 quarterback, he's still a leader on this team. That says a lot. And I think that sets him up well to come in a situation, whether it's 1 games, 2 games, 3 games. I think that sets him up well to be successful.
I'll just say this, Aber, you sound like a young guy to me. I actually covered Seth Littrell's high school football games as a recruit. And 1999, no, before the 2000 season, they had played the 99. No, it was before the 99 season, prior to the 99 season.
He was at OU already.
Yeah. So prior to the 99 season, we rolled out there for the Bob Stoops Media Golf Tournament. Guess who was in my cart? Seth Littrell. And we talked for 18 holes about OU football and Oklahoma high school football. Me and Seth Littrell in a golf cart for 3.5 hours. That was fun. Those were the days.
Well, you guys aren't as neither of you covered the 85 team, right? Which is getting honored on Saturday.
I actually did cover one game of the 85 team. Yeah.
But you are old, dude. Yeah, you're just old. Yeah.
I was in elementary school at least. I watched a lot of the 85 team.
Yeah. But, by the way, quick promo. I interviewed Barry Switzer this morning about that team that season. Brady Trantham is doing a fantastic job on that story. Runs tomorrow, I think. Yeah,
should be Thursday afternoon, evening. If not everybody gets back to us, we'll let you know. We might push it back to Friday, but that'll be up there. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com, as well as by the time that you are listening to this, I'll have my story about John Kuceyeski and everything that he's brought to the program up on the website, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. It'll be interesting to see, just a total sidebar. Arbuckle was asked about some of his head coaching aspirations, stuff like that, since he's been tossed in there. And everyone does a very good job in those situations of answering it. I would encourage you to head to either John's YouTube page, John Hoover Media, or the website, OklahomaSoonersOnSI.com. Click on the video. The way that Arbuckle seemed like legitimately like almost caught off guard and was like hands up, like, I ain't worried about that kind of stuff right now type situation. We'll see in November if his name heats up, stuff like that. But I do wonder, you kind of mentioned earlier, that if Coach Kuzi is getting that much pub and that much help, he might be like an OC candidate. I also wonder, like, if Ben Arbuckle thinks like I'd like to stay this year and then maybe next year search, if he's like, hey, if you stay too, whenever I go somewhere, you're just going to be the OC. So we'll see what that all pans out. That's a conversation for another time. Yep. A lot longer, maybe in November if things keep rocking and rolling. Not just Michael Hawkins, a familiar face to Oakland fans will be out there. Brent Venables has talked about it. Last Thursday, he kind of alluded to getting some names back. He talked about it Monday night. He talked about it Tuesday. He talked about it on the SEC teleconference. Oklahoma, barring a setback, Giovanni Gibson, wide receiver, Arkansas Pine Bluff transfer, supposed to make his debut this weekend. Eli Bowen, supposed to make it all the way back in. And you should see a much, much healthier offensive line. I don't know if Fasusi's going to get held out or not. I've not checked in just to see what that is. But Fasusi, Jake Mikla, and Pabechi Wiwu were the 3 guys that were nursing ankle injuries. Should all be good to go. Again, knock on wood, barring like a roll-up or something for Texas. I know everyone's really, really excited about Giovanni Gibson, but how important is Eli Bowen coming back in? Because we know this. Brent Venables, the defensive coordinator, loves to be aggressive, loves to leave his corners on islands if he trusts them. Cortland Guillory found that out against Auburn. Just another experienced guy that's been out there on an island in SEC play that can't hurt.
Yeah, especially the experience part. He came in second half of last season, and he wasn't just a starter, right, as a true freshman. Wow, he's starting as a true freshman. He was the best corner they had. He was, by a lot of measures, the best, most efficient defender they had, or number 2 in some areas according to Pro Football Focus. So for him to have that kind of mettle to go out there and that kind of gravitas as a freshman to be able to perform like that, and there were some tough games that he had to go out there and expose himself to. He doesn't. I'm a freshman. I don't know that much, but you know what? I'm going to play hard. I'm going to play. I'm going to do what the coaches taught me, and I'm going to play my best. And he did, and he stood out so often. So many times he would come up and blow up a screen pass with complete confidence, or a toss sweep, or a quarterback pops out of the pocket. He comes up and knocks the guy on the ground with authority. And then so many times he's playing a deep ball. They're like, let's pick on the freshman. They throw a lob ball or a sky ball to the tall receiver, and he's out there at 5'11", I think 5'10 and a half, 5'11", and he's competing with the guy. He wasn't 100%, but he was more often than not knocking the football to incomplete. I just love seeing him play as a true freshman. What you got to hope for now is that his mind as a sophomore, right, a returning starter, so to speak, hasn't been clouded by excess coaching, let's call it. Not coaching that's wrong. It's just, hey, he gets it. Let's go ahead and feed him all of it at once. And sometimes that can cloud a young guy's mind. And so I hope that hasn't happened for him, because he's a fearless hitter. He's an efficient tackler, good form tackler, and he's smart enough to be involved within arm's reach of just about every ball that's thrown in his direction. He doesn't get fooled by double moves or pump fakes or stuff like that. So, yeah, if he's back, then I would think Cortland Guillory kind of moves into a more of a supporting role, because Eli Bowen is just fantastic.
Yeah, my first introduction to Bowen was the Alabama game last year. Obviously, he was great in that one. That's huge to get him back. I think the offensive impact of getting Giovanni Gibson is almost equally as huge. Just you look at how big he is, how productive he was last year at Arkansas Pine Bluff. Sure, FCS competition. Look what Keontae Lewis has already done for OU's offense. I think it's proven that with the right coaching, with the right chemistry with their quarterback, that FCS receivers can absolutely play at this level. What I'm curious about, though, is how do they use all of this talent? It's a good problem to have, considering what this receiver room looked like, how decimated it was by injuries. But how the heck are they going to juggle all these reps? Because, I mean, we're seeing, for example, Zion Kearney, that's someone who's looked really good when he's gotten reps, when he's gotten targets. His impact's very minimal on this offense. Same for a guy like Ivan Carrion. I think he still has a lot of potential to be a really good college football receiver. So I'm curious to see how much volume Gibson gets instantly. A game like Kent State, this is an opportunity where guys like Kearney, Carrion, maybe even Zion Raggins, players like that should be able to get a lot of reps, a lot of targets. But that's the big question for me. Like, how does his snap count compare to other receivers in the room? But I mean, overall, just getting someone that big, that fast for someone his size, that's huge, especially when you have Texas 10 days away.
Quick ad for you guys before we move on. The wide receivers. Here's the illustration of what Carson's talking about. Deion Burks leads the team right now with 23 catches, only 265 yards, so 11 and a half yards a catch. Only 2 touchdowns, leads the team. Isaiah Satania has 22 catches, so 1 behind. He's second on the team with 284 yards. He's averaging 12.9 yards per carry, 1 touchdown. Kanik, of course, the tight end, is third on the team, 18 catches, but he leads the team with 307 yards, 17 yards a catch, has yet to get in the end zone. And then Keontae Lewis, 17. He's fourth on the team with 17 catches, fourth on the team with 210 yards, tied for first with 2 touchdowns. Now you're going to put Giovanni Gibson in there, and the catch, those guys' catches you would think will diminish a little bit unless they're throwing the ball more. But you're right. All of a sudden you're asking, where's Zion Kearney? Where's the other, Ivan Carrion, Jacob Jordan, where Elijah Thomas even has a catch this year. Where are those guys' numbers going to be? And I think Giovanni Gibson is going to probably take all of the rest of those and probably some from some of those first 4.
Yeah, we've seen a really tight, almost NFL style rotation, which is not a lot of rotation. You know what I mean? That it's a personnel group thing, not necessarily all right, this is the Elijah Thomas drive, stuff like that. So we'll see. It's also interesting because it's so hard to project. By all accounts, like, we know that Deion Burks was being held out of stuff and things, so that plays into things. But it was like, hey, Satania and Gibson, those are your 2 guys that are your consistent big play guys throughout spring ball. And that's one of those things that we would start to ask, like, in fall camp, some of the defensive backs, just like, hey, who stands out with the wide receivers? At this point, Giovanni Gibson is hurt, and you have guys still going back. Like it's burned into my brain. Devon Jordan being like, and oh, by the way, Giovanni, he's coming. He talked about his blocking ability, stuff like that. So I'm gonna be interested to see. I guess the one flip side of it is the bye week is all about self scouting, all that stuff. If Oklahoma can't get a run game up and going, I think the self scout's going to be, well, we're pretty darn good in pass protection, even when our line's been hurt. And now we've added what we feel like is another weapon. We need to run enough to keep people honest, but if we believe in our Heisman Trophy candidate quarterback, John Mateer, when he comes back in, that may solve a little bit of the receiver problems because it may just be as simple as they're not going to have a 1,000-yard rusher, but they might air raid this thing up a little bit more, which I think that Ben Arbuckle shown he'd be pretty comfortable with. So that'll all come once we get to the Cotton Bowl and beyond. That's when those questions start being answered, not necessarily this week. Elsewhere in bye week land, it was notable, I thought. A lot of times there's coach speak going in, stuff like that. It seemed like Brent Venables was almost like jonesing to hammer a couple of different times, Aber, whether it be last Thursday, whether it be Monday night on the coaches show or Tuesday in the press conference about how not only is he proud with how they attacked the bye week, but it seemed like he's like, this is the best bye week we've had since we've been here, the maturity, all that stuff. It kind of mirrors how over the moon he was in the Temple post game about just the maturity of the team and how he thought that was a mature win. I'm sure it is a sign of maturity, but when you look over at that Oklahoma defense, it feels like that even for a bye week, when you've got that much depth and that many guys still competing for spots, I know everybody take a drink competitive depth, but it seems like that is helping this team stay fresh on Saturdays, but continue to push each other all throughout the week.
Yeah, it really is. And you look at just sort of position by position, whether it be the defensive line, the linebackers who have, I think, shown maybe even some more depth than I thought that they had before the season on the back end. And then you add Eli Bowen into that, who I think, going back to what y'all were talking about earlier, I think maybe it's not an instant integration with him. It's going to take maybe a little bit of some time, but when you've got a guy like Gilroy who can, allow that time there, I think that helps. And yeah, just that depth and the continued pushing, and as good as they've been on defense. And this is a topic that is going to linger until it changes, and I'm going to write about it again later in the week. When you don't have any turnovers, that it can allow you to keep pushing forward, even if, not that they would consciously, back off or be complacent, but I think it guards against a little bit of that complacency when you've got something so tangible that you can continue to work for and continue to improve upon. And I think that can, in a weird way, help this defense that they haven't been able to go out and force turnovers yet, because there's sort of that carrot dangling for them here in the future.
Yeah, it's despite that, this was well covered in the OU game notes this week, but just going to run down some defensive stats for you. Everybody buckle up. Sacks per game, first. That's in the NCAA, in the FBS, not the SEC, first. Third down conversion defense, first. Opponent punts per game, first. Opponent plays at 10 yards plus, first. That one's just a raw number, so it might be aided slightly by the bye week, but still first in the SEC. Opponent pass yards per attempt, second in the country, first in the SEC, second in the country in touchdowns allowed, second in total defense, third in passing touchdowns allowed. These are all third right here. Tackles for loss per game, scoring defense, passing defense, opponents' first downs per game, fourth in yards per play, fifth in pass efficiency rating, seventh in rushing touchdowns allowed, seventh in opposing pass completion percentage, and the lowly rushing defense, merely 19th in the FBS. If Brent Venables was brought in to bring the defense back, 4 games, we'll see, but the way that they played against Michigan and against Auburn, it feels like we're getting really, really close to a mission accomplished banner for the defense, at least.
Yeah, can you imagine pairing this defense with the 2017 or 2018 or 2019 offenses? How bad those defenses were back then? You would have the all-time unit of a team just plowing through people for a national title. I mean, just unbelievable how good this defense has played. When Brent got here, it was can he fix this defense? I mean, That's job one. If your name's Brent Venables and you come back to Oklahoma and the defense has been a statistical joke for the last 10, 12 to 15 years, job one is to fix the defense. He's done that. They're probably not going to finish first in the country in all those categories that you mentioned, or top 10 even in a lot of those categories. But just to be where they're at right now, what an unbelievable rebuild by Brent to just not, he hasn't landed the I mean, take a look at Georgia's number of 5 stars. Take a look at Alabama's number of 5 stars. He's not done anywhere close to that in terms of recruiting, but he's gotten a couple of those guys here and there. And then he's turned the culture around just completely on its ear. Like, we're Oklahoma. We shouldn't suck at defense. That's what their mindset is now. We're Oklahoma. We should be great at defense. In just a couple of recruiting classes, he's completely flipped that script. Just unbelievable.
You look at I'm gonna hedge into Brady Trantham territory. You look at like historically what's made Oklahoma football what it is. Oklahoma's never like recruited poorly. Let's not make this out to be like a sister of the poor thing. It's not. But when you talk about like walking to the Cotton Bowl, you look across the other sideline. Texas always has the athletes. When it has separated Oklahoma and made Oklahoma be a program that has produced championships decade over decade, conference titles decade over decade, it's been saying we do really, really good in recruiting, and then you maximize all those guys. And it's always about when they're at their best, it's raising that recruiting level to where you're maximizing studs and things like that. And if the defense is just a test case, then what Brent Venables has done, and maybe this current recruiting class isn't going to blow anyone away with a bunch of stars. We've talked about it all offseason, right? The circumstances of Jim Nagy coming in, of recruiting on a hot seat style negative recruiting stuff. We'll just look over to 2027, and we will look to 2027 here in a couple seconds. It's already stacking and trending back toward where Brent Venables had those recruiting classes, his first full recruiting class, his second full recruiting class. And then you go out and you add a David Stone, a Jaden Jackson that by no means is a lowly rated guy, but is a huge eval, made a big priority. A Cortland Guillory, huge eval, made a big priority. Eli Bowen, I know it's a Peyton Bowen brother, but throughout that entire recruitment, it was very maintained. We want Eli Bowen for Eli Bowen, not just because he's the brother of Peyton Bowen, stuff like that. And do you maximize all that? That's what you need to do. You need to do that on the offensive side as well. But when you've had 3 different offensive coordinators through officially, that jolts that off a little bit. But certainly a good start, and something I had kind of asked Brent Venables, I think, coming out of the Michigan games. It's like this defense is the test case because you have Dominic Williams as a transfer, Kendall Daniels as a transfer, Kendall Dolby's a JUCO guy. The rest of those guys over there on that defensive side of the ball that are rocking and rolling, OU commits, OU develop. And that's what Brent Venables has done. So we'll see. Certainly, you're 4 games into this season. You got to land the plane, all that stuff. But through 4 games, that's a pretty darn good thing to take out to the recruiting channel. Be like, this is what we would like it to be like. Come help be a part of that. So before we get on to the recruiting, though, we do need to take a stop in. John Mateer is back in Norman. Obviously, he had made it back by Thursday. He has one small Band-Aid on his thumb. That has been well documented. The Chipotle employee who has a dad who's on an A&M message board has declared that John Mateer thinks he's going to play for Texas. Tongue in cheek, all that stuff. Boys, I think we're like, it's a live podcast next week. I do think that we have entered the territory. It was always very steady, right? Everyone around it said, let's wait until the surgery actually happens to get a timeline. I would not be stunned. We have reached the point that I don't think it would be crazy for John Mateer to start for Oklahoma against Texas next week, which is going to make next week an absolute S show, I think. So I'm just thinking back to the week that Dylan Gabriel was in concussion protocol, which is much more cut and dry, and that was a hellacious week. I feel like South Carolina now, to me, feels like the back end of when like it might either be Texas or South Carolina, which is kind of incredible from where we were last Wednesday.
It is incredible. Just, I mean, a broken thumb. We don't know the extent of the break. We don't know the severity of it. We don't know the complexity of the surgery. You know, what procedures were done. Might have just been a little incision, go in there, put a little, I don't know, super glue, on the bone. Is that how they do it now? It's 2025, right? I know that if Mateer comes back early and finishes this thing strong, I'm going to check and see if Dr. Shin's in my network, because I got to get this thing fixed.
Have to. Well, J-Dub, Jalen Williams at Thunder Media Day with a couple of fantastic bars. He said, first off, Kobe Bryant went to Dr. Shin for a consult. So why are you like using me as the guiding light? And I'm just like, well, J-Dub, it's a little bit harder to get Kobe on the phone than
Yeah.
you, for many reasons, and that would be regardless. But yeah, it's a Shinsanity has come, it has gone, and Carson, I'm just throwing this out there, like. I think that John Mateer would like for Dr. Shin to be like a guest of John Mateer for the Ole Miss game back in Norman, and I think Dr. Shin might be up for it, which would just be absolutely like nutty if that's something that came to fruition.
It would break the Sooner Twitterverse, whatever you want to call it. It would go absolutely nuts. I think I think Mateer's got to come back for Texas and win that game for that to be warranted. But from everything we've heard, the professional athletes, the caliber of them that have gone through Dr. Shin, this guy knows what he's doing, and leave it to A&M and OU fans who have pretty much nothing in common to unite over the hatred of Texas. You got to love that. A Tex Ags message board being the source. Obviously, I think that was a message board geniuses thing that got exposed. And then the dad of the Chipotle employee was like, no, this actually happened. This is legit. So you got to love it. Texas A&M and OU fans both kind of hoping Mateer's back so OU has a better chance in that game. College football, look at it, man.
We will be monitoring the Auburn message board, however, to know for sure if he's playing. I don't know if you guys tracked this. The Auburn message board had the rumor the morning of the Saban retirement announcement. They're like, hey, by the way, I think Nick's hanging it up. They had the rumor of the Pearl retirement, and it was pointed out to me by Bob Prisbillo. The Auburn message board last night also had the Brian Snitker of the Atlanta Braves had told the clubhouse that he was retiring announcement as well, which means that I don't know if that means that Auburn message boards have done their hat trick and they're good, or if we're waiting for one last ride. But
Hey,
yeah,
Carson,
I know that.
don't forget, Carson, it was the Texags message boards that got Oklahoma thrown under the bus in 2006 with the Rhett Bomar working at the local, working, I put in air quotes, at the local car dealership. That came from a Texags message board. They also said Adrian Peterson was doing it. Adrian's like, I don't have a job. I don't need a job. All I had was Alexis out of the deal. Back in the day, man, the beginnings of message boards and the recruiting, 2000 to 2005, those recruiting websites, they were unhinged.
Not Bro Bible and Slice Bread though. That totally different.
Yeah, that's right.
So, I'm just
sliced bread.
Obviously, if we know something like official or something that we report, check the website, all that stuff. I'm just telling you, like next week, batten down the hatches because I love our friend Tattoo Baker on Twitter. He does great content, but going back and finding videos from spring ball of John Mateer throwing to Giovanni and putting out the like, hey, look at this practice video today. He knows what he's doing, and a lot of people know what's happening. Just look alive. When your uncle comes to you and is like, what the hell's happened? I read this on Facebook. Let's all cut through the reported stuff versus the, stuff next week. Good luck.
What we can do is our friend Willie from the OU Daily is going to have his head peeking up over the windows to look down on the practice field to see who's actually taking the starting course. I mean, if the OU Daily is not doing that again this year, they're not living up to their own standard, right?
Not weird enough. Which
looking out of the window across the street, down onto the parking, into the practice field to see who the starting quarterback is. Guys, that's how it's done. Just saying, the standard is the standard.
Although, to be fair, Hoove, and I could talk about this for a long, long time, the problem was giving up that you had that vantage point to do it.
It was.
And just
that was bad.
Again, I've said this a lot, but go with sources. The sources being your right eye and your left eye, and not we're watching from this part that a few of us have watched a practice from that vantage point at various points in time.
Everyone knows that couch. Everyone knows the spot. It's not, and everyone listen to this. The ones that know, and the ones that don't, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I will put this out there. Also, I just would like to take everyone back to 2022. A certain quarterback's in concussion protocol. They practiced in Everest Indoor that week. And somehow Dylan Gabriel with a helmet on gets clipped into a Twitter video put out by OU's official account. It's just... Next week's going to be wild. Buckle up. Just
Yeah.
this coaching staff's been there before, done
And
that. The team.
another thing, Aber, you know this, being at the airport, when somebody lands at the airport, that's good. That's not weird. That's not
Oh
weird.
no.
That's good journalism by Willie Gillespie and the OU Daily staff. So, in
Yeah,
my opinion, and I
absolutely.
put this on Twitter, in my opinion, when John Mateer does talk to the press, they should get the first interview. Those two that were there at the airport with the video camera reporting from the airport should get the first interview before any of us because they earned it.
Yeah, they did a great job with that, and fantastic idea and follow through for them. Not weird at all. That's the job.
That's the job.
That's what you got to do, and good on them for continuing a strong tradition of
That's
journalism.
right.
Max Westheimer hates to see us coming as a gag.
Yep.
That is for damn sure. All right, let's Y over into some recruiting talk here for a moment. It was maybe the newsiest bye week in the history of bye weeks. We had the Mateer stuff happening, all that stuff. And then Bill Bedenbaugh just like shirt off, flexing all over the state of Oklahoma. He picks up Cooper Hackett, who had flipped from Texas Tech. Him and Caden Penny, the Bigsby star. Bigsby, by the way, number one in On3/Rivals Massey College high school football ratings. Shout out to Bigsby. So not one, but two in-state guys, not one, but two offensive linemen, not one, but two elite in-state offensive linemen. Not a bad way to kick himself into bye weekend from Bill Bedenbaugh there, Aber.
Yeah, well, first of all, when you're Bill Bedenbaugh and you've lost as much weight as he has, you want to take your shirt off as often as possible, right? So certainly warranted celebration there for him. But it's crazy to think about, and obviously these guys have to perform it on the field, but as good as Bill Bedenbaugh has been as an offensive line coach, the recruiting has taken a step up even to another level the last couple cycles with what he was able to get last year with Michael Fasusi and Ryan Foje, who were already playing roles on that offensive line, to the pieces that he added this week. Just another indication that even coaches who have been in it for a long time are sort of, Bill Bedenbaugh is sort of the epitome of an old school type of football assistant coach, and he's been able to adapt and do the things that he needs to do in this new era of NIL and everything. And clearly, part of that is, what Jim Nagy and his staff are doing with the contract negotiation element of it. But Bill Bedenbaugh is able to, rack up these wins, and it led to a really big week, as good of a recruiting week as Oklahoma has had, aside from a signing period in a long, long time.
Thought it was no coincidence after the Auburn game that when Brent was asked about recruiting, he had talked about, or maybe it was the Michigan game, either one. He had talked about this is a great place for offensive linemen to come develop, great place for quarterbacks to come develop. That's when they had Cooper Hackett in the house, and at that point it was Peyton Houston. He obviously committed to LSU, but thought it was no coincidence there. I thought it was no coincidence that he also talked about in his opening statement this week, being able to get out around the state, Oklahoma still being a priority. I know that was something that the staff had maybe taken it in the teeth a little bit when they had passed on a Caden Jones, when they had passed on some of those guys, came back and got ZZ out at Rejoice Christian, the wide receiver in the 2026 class. But 2027, not just striking two in-state guys, but two massive ones. And Bixby's the place that Oklahoma's not had a ton of success recruiting. And Aber, to your point, it kind of feels like Beanbaugh's taken he will admit he was a slow adopter to NIL, and he's found the balance between be competitive enough. They weren't the highest offer for Fasusi. They weren't the highest offer for Cooper Hackett. Blend it with, we're going to get you what you need. We're also going to develop you so you can make that long-term money. And it seems like he's found a winning formula there. And it's not just the offensive line. Carson, you wrote about Michael McCreary, the 2027 DB from San Antonio that Oklahoma landed. Suddenly, it feels like as much as we've looked at the 2026 class and been like, on the board in 2027, 2026, you're like evals over stars. 2027, it's like you can have all you want. Evals, stars, whatever. OU's off and rolling.
Yeah, no, they definitely are number one class so far in 2027, which that should be taken with a grain of salt. I think Sacramento State has like the fifth best class just because they have 7 commits. But I mean, you look at the class that OU has, 4 players that are at least 4 stars or better, 5 total commits. The offensive line, that's obviously the highlight. McCreary, everything I've read about him, did a little bit of insight just looking into him. He looks like he's going to be a really good defensive back at the college level. That's huge, kind of reaffirming those pipelines in both Texas, the in-state pipelines in Oklahoma. It's massive, and it kind of shows that recruits are still to a degree valuing culture over money sometimes. Obviously, it being reported that Hackett took, I think the word was significantly less money from OU than Texas Tech. It's cool to see that in this changing era where money is a thing. It definitely is. There's no going around that. That culture, facilities, coaching, there's still value to that, and recruits still see that. So as long as OU keeps winning on the field, the culture is still staying what it's been with Brent Venables being the coach. I think there's going to be more momentum coming too.
Yeah, we'll be on the lookout for. Let's jump back to 2026. Former Tulane commit, wide receiver Braden Allen had been committed to Tulane. He'd visited Oklahoma, visited Colorado, decommits from Tulane. So it feels like a little bit of a heads up between OU and Colorado. Don't have like a timeline on that, but feels imminent. But that could maybe potentially be the next one off the board for Oklahoma looking back into 2026, which we'll see. Who it feels like if Florida gets a coaching change, maybe that staff breaks apart. Oklahoma's been monitoring, been waiting in the wings on a couple of those guys. But this was always going to kind of be, you might not love what the 2026 class is on paper if you're just looking at stars. They're going to bake on evals, but going back to 2027, it feels like you're starting to see this is what Nagy and Venables together want to try to do. And I mean, it's early days, but the returns have been great.
Yeah, if you're Jim Nagy and if you're Brent Venables too, a little bit of news that came out this morning, you're definitely putting that to work. And that is there are now, with Dylan Gabriel being elevated to the starting quarterback in Cleveland, there are now 6 former Oklahoma starting quarterbacks who are starting in the National Football League this week. 6 of 32 were former OU quarterbacks. I know you've got, USC and you've got South Carolina and you've got Oregon. I know that. I know. But you've also got on the front side, you've got Texas Tech and you've got Alabama and you've got, Texas A&M. You've got 6 guys who at one point in their career decided Oklahoma was the best place for them. And guess what? They're all in the NFL. They're all starting right now. That's incredible to me. So that's something that if you're Nagy and Venables, you're saying, I mean, you can go to LSU if you want to, but there's only one, right, school that has 6 starting quarterbacks in the National Football League this week. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, it'll be if Gabriel could hold on to that job for a couple of weeks, also be able to preach like it's not just Lincoln Riley guys too. It's another guy that came to Oklahoma, and yeah, he got some other stuff elsewhere. We get that, but we'll see. We will see as well.
Also, speaking of, there's only one. I heard the idea this way. I can't remember if it was the Oklahoma Breakdown podcast. You got to have when Mateer comes back, you've got to have Dr. Shin come out with the thumb going. There's only one. Oklahoma in the hype video, right? I mean, would that not be poetic?
They threw that. One thing has to happen. You have to be unbeaten going into Ole Miss.
Yes.
If you drop the Texas game or the South Carolina game or both, can't do it. Can't do it. But you can't replace a Barry Switzer or something like that, even for one game with Dr. Shin, unless you were unbeaten and at the front of the Heisman race. And Mateer needs to play against Texas too. Like, I feel like it would be awesome, but like Mateer's got to play against Texas and you got to be undefeated. If neither of those things happen, then I'm just kind of like, great idea. Maybe put him out there between the third and the fourth quarter and let that be the rallying cry to get the fans going and give you that.
If he's on the video board in any measure, if he's on the video board in any way, shape, or form, even in a meme situation where somebody has cut and pasted his face on, one of those deals, the place is going to come apart at the seams.
Or just have him be the last one out of the locker room and just touch the play like a champion. Like just one of those, like, if you know, just toss it in there. Just like, what's going on there? So, hey, real quick before we dip out of here too, Brent Venables, he talked about a couple of times. Monday night, he had talked about basically having both his sons back in, one strength coach at UAB, one still finished out at Clemson to enjoy the weekend. But he said it again. I don't disagree with him talking about when you look across college football, He believes there's not a single team that Oklahoma can't play with if they do everything right. There's also not a single team left on the schedule other than Kent State that they couldn't lose a game to. I do think that the further we get into this, when you look at the Oklahoma defense and just what we've seen out of Mateer and like gotta have it type possessions, right now, I don't disagree with Brent Venables. If that defense is going to play that way, the takeaways are going to come. I kind of agree with him. I don't think there's a team on that they're going to step on the field and be like, we can't win this game. Does that mean they're going to go undefeated? Does that mean they're going to be able to string it all together? No, but I do feel like the door is cracked, if nothing else, to like look around and go, why can't this team make a college football playoff if health smiles upon Oklahoma and they get everybody back and rolling?
Yeah, I agree, Ryan. All you got to do is look no further than Alabama and Florida State. Florida State takes down Alabama in the opener and then loses in week 4. Alabama, meanwhile, is kicking the crap out of Georgia in week 4. I mean, what? Yeah, so everybody's flawed in college football right now, even at the top. Oregon might be somebody who is going to be hard to throw a lasso around, and for that matter, Ohio State might be somebody who's really tough to get a grip on. But other than those two, I think everybody else is certainly gettable.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of, to your point, Ryan, a double-edged sword because, yes, I don't think there is a team in college football that OU can't beat. But on the flip side, I think there are about 25 teams that on a given day, maybe they could beat the Oklahoma Sooners. You look specifically in this conference. I mean, aside from Arkansas and Kentucky, we've seen flashes of brilliance from the other 14 teams in this league. And I think for OU's sake, OU probably, I mean, you could argue that their 5 first games, the 5 first opponents were the 5 worst offenses they'll face in the regular season. I mean, the way Texas has looked, you could argue the first 6. So it does only get tougher. I think Missouri, Tennessee definitely look better than we expected them to. Maybe South Carolina is not quite as good. So, I mean, every game, aside from Kent State, is winnable, but it's also losable, which that just kind of speaks to where college football is this year. Ohio State, probably the most complete team at this point, but they don't have that just awesome quarterback play that's going to make it a blowout game. They're going to beat you in the trenches. I don't think there is one team far and away better than everyone else, which makes our jobs more fun, makes college football more interesting. There's more parity. So you got to love that. And I think that's what's got to be more encouraging. Yes, there are more losable games, but it is more attainable to make a run at the national championship this year than I feel like it's been in a while.
Yeah, and I think that that's a product of a lot of the changes in college football. And I think for me, and I've talked about this a lot, I thought when some of these changes started happening, NIL and some of the iterations of that, that the gulf between the haves and the have-nots would get bigger. And we'd see the Alabamas and the Georgias and the Texases and programs like that really start dominating even more. The reality has been it's bunched everything together. And yes, you've seen some programs that have been traditional powers or that have had done some really good things struggle, but you've also seen some programs that you've really never seen take off, like Indiana. And I mean, heck, right now you could argue that Indiana, resume wise, should be the number 1 team in the country. And it's just been a little bit surprising to me, and I think a lot of people in college football, how that has created the parity. But it has, and it's been not only this year, but I think the last 3 or 4 years where you've had some really good teams, but you haven't had that just dominant team that you're like, this team is going to be the one that if everything goes right, they're going to win the national championship. Right now you could look at 8 or 10 teams as teams that you could really easily sing ultimately winning the national championship. So I think it's made college football fun in a different way, even as the realities have changed across this sport.
I think one of the like big unanswerable questions when we started all this was, what is the real effect of saying, hey, it doesn't just have to be that when Alabama is recruiting against people, it doesn't mean that it has to be physically LSU wins 2 more 5-star heads up battles against Alabama. It's like, well, what if Texas Tech takes 2 off the board? and then Oregon comes in and takes 2 more off the board, and then you get one that decides that they're just really in on everything Bill Belichick or something like that, spreading those guys out and then having some sort of salary cap adjacent thing gives you more of an NFL situation. Like, okay, you can have Pat Mahomes. That means, though, that are you going to have to make the sacrifice at corner? You have to make the sacrifice at receiver? You have to make it at left tackle? What does that look like? I think we've seen that a little bit. It was part of some of the theme of SEC Media Day, I thought, going all the way back in, where Kirby basically said, our 2 deep is younger than it's ever been, because that's not how you build depth. You have to throw freshmen and sophomores out there, and it's been more unpredictable up and down. So it should be fun. We will see. I do need to get in contact with some people. I am curious. I was throwing this out there too. Things that what looks better, what looks worse. Well, there's a lot that like has to happen before this is like an issue. Oklahoma has to beat Texas and has to follow it up with South Carolina. Then Ole Miss has to beat Georgia. I don't think anyone had it on the table, though, that like going into October, Oklahoma Ole Miss might have been a top 5 matchup, which is evidenced by the fact that the SEC set that in the early window in Norman. I know that they set that. I wonder if they're able to be like, our bad. If this pans out and game day wants to come and watch what will be a bare minimum top 5 matchup. Again, a lot has to happen. I wonder if they're able to like bang that down and be like, just kidding, that's a night game. Sorry to everyone, but we would like to bump that to the night game because of what we have to do. So,
well, it's just going to be a Big 12 throwback, Ryan, where you have your biggest games at 11 a.m. and that's just the reality of things.
We call that big noon kickoff around these parts. Congratulations to our friends at Michigan and Ohio State and Oregon. All right, gentlemen, I think that's all the damage we can do. Plenty more content still to come to the site. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. That's your place to be. Like we mentioned earlier, Brady's got a big story coming out about this 85 team that Oklahoma's honoring. A ton more to come through. And obviously into game day, everything Oklahoma and Kent State, everything Michael Hawkins Jr. and everything John Mateer beyond. Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. Hit the football tab, scroll. If you missed any interviews, you can watch them all there. You can also go to YouTube, John Hoover Media on the YouTube, all that stuff. And if you're like, man, that was a lot of information just rattled at me, Ryan, I need something a little bit easier, a little bit more dumbed down. If you're a Twitter person, at Sooners on SI, you can hit us up there. If you are on Facebook all the time, just search Oklahoma Sooners on SI. All the branding matches, if you know what that stuff looks like. We're posting everything there as well. You can get it there. Hoove, anything else before we depart here on this Kent State double bye week Wednesday?
Double bye week. No, just looking to get back on the field. This is going to be a fun week to watch those guys play.
Oh, battle series stuff going to get going here on the softball front. I need to reach out to somebody to be like, we will be there. So that happening. We'll be hurtling toward men's and women's basketball. I don't know if we have a media day on the schedule upcoming, but here in the next couple of weeks, I think there'll be something with a Porter Moser and a Ginny Baranchek. So as that comes, as always, Oklahoma Sooners on SI.com. For who? For Carson, for Aber, for the great Brady Trantham, who's fumbling around somewhere, jamming out to Metallica, I assume. We'll talk to you guys up next in the post-game pod coming at you hot after OU Kent State, and then we'll be back next week for what is always one of our longest, biggest episodes of the year, previewing Oklahoma and Texas. It's October 1st. I can't believe we're almost there. All right, for Aber, go Cubs, go. Do the damn thing. We'll talk to the rest of you guys. Rams, yes, as well, but the Yankee after the Yankee, if you load up the bases in the bottom of the ninth and then don't put any runs in, I'm sorry, we want you to win, Hoove, but you made history in the wrong way, and I can't give that to the people. I'm sorry.
I got nothing.
It was a disaster.
It's an annual letdown.
There's always game two. All right, that's all the time that we've got
Poor
today.
beleaguered Yankees fans.
It's been a tough couple of decades.
We'll talk to you guys next week. See ya.